Hey everyone, it's patch 3.22 Ancestor, and I wanted to make a video on something that Chris mentioned in the reveal video for the new patch. Now, one of the things that was showcased was a new type of item called Omens. These are going to be something that you are going to get as a reward for fully finishing a tournament, which is the new mechanic. And one of the ones that Chris mentioned and actually briefly stopped on for a second was the Omen of Fortune. What this does is, with this in your inventory, if you were to use a chance orb on an item, it will guarantee that it turns into a unique item if possible. If you are aware of what Trash Treasure is, this is literally Trash Treasure being brought back into the game. This historically has been used to forcefully make some items that typically are either very tricky to make or to use it as a way to force rare items to happen. Now, the thing is, GGG obviously was aware of this. So in the past, the way they've designed items was by adding a garbage unique into every single pool of good items and weighting it down. So most of the time, this would actually proc the garbage unique. A good example of this, which was the last item that was added before this change happened, was Squire. Squire is the only elegant round shield in the game, but specifically the Oppressor was also added into the game just as a way for you to not be able to instantly trash to treasure any elegant round shield into a Squire, keeping it as a rare item. It also was very heavily weighted. So if you did attempt to trash or treasure a bunch of elegant round shields, it wasn't just a 50-50. 99% of the time you'd be getting a Oppressor instead of a Squire. So it basically just made it not viable. Now the thing is, that's been quite a few patches ago. Squire was introduced into the game in Scourge, which was, well, almost 2 years at this point. And since then, we've actually had quite a few uniques, and quite a few uniques have actually gotten their rarities adjusted that didn't have multiple items on their base, which can potentially mean that there are going to be some possibilities for this to be useful as a way for you to profit. Now, obviously, towards the end of the season, this is going to be valued around the best outcome. So for example, if it's found out that's a 1 in 20 chance of you getting a Mage Blood when you use this on heavy belts, then the price of this will be exactly 1/20th of a Mage Blood. Again, this will be heavily weighted, so that's probably not going to be the case. But if whatever the best outcome is going to be the exact price of this item. But for the start of the season, that might not be true. And again, we don't know how common these are going to be. We're going to assume these are pretty rare. Back in the day, a Trash or Treasure used to cost about 7 to 10 Exalted, which is the same thing as 7 to 10 Div now. And we could probably assume that it's going to be just as rare, if not more rare, considering that it has substantially better use cases now. So what I decided to do was to go look through literally every single unique in the game and figure out which uniques are going to potentially be profitable and which uniques you might want to think about if you get one of these to make some profit off of it. Because you might actually have a place in the market where you can buy these chance items and then resell the items for a little bit of profit. But again, that might not last very long, especially if word gets out about this. So I want to go through them really quickly. So the first thing I want to mention is jewels. Again, we don't know the rarity of the Omen. So we don't know how expensive it might be. It might be so rare that just because the rarity of it alone is going to be 20, 30 div, or it might be so common that they might be 50, 60 C each, which I really don't think it will because it's going to crash quite a few items. But if it's going to be really cheap, jewels are actually a very good option. These are the only jewels that can be chanced in the game. And I guess if we want to quickly talk about what items this is usable on, anything that drops from a boss cannot be chanced. Those are impossible. The only things we can chance are specifically items that can drop basically anywhere. If an item has a specific place that it drops or any sort of requirements for it to drop, then it's not chanceable most of the time. And because of that, there's actually only a few jewels that are chanceable. So what we care about here are the base types. So if you look at all the Viridian jewels, we actually see that there's quite a lot of really good Viridian jewels. There's Lionized Fall, which is typically pretty expensive at the start of a season. There's a Natural Instinct, which always keeps its price. This is one of the rarest items in the game. And obviously there's Storm Shroud as well. There are going to be a few bricks here, such as Pure Talent or Intuitive Leap, which doesn't really hold its value very much. But if the price of the Omens are cheap enough and these are not weighted and it's just a straight up 1 out of 6, which I believe is how these jewels will be, because if we look at Tainted Mythic Orbs, those are not weighted. So I don't believe this will be weighted at all. I don't think jewels are rated at all. They are just all simply assumed to be as powerful as each other, which might not always be the case. But this has a few outcomes that's pretty good. Another option is Crimson Jewels. Crimson Jewels are very, very good. All of us know about Immutable Force and Blood Notch. These are going to be worth quite a lot of money, and they're going to be keeping that value unless they massively nerf the Sun Tech, which again, we don't have the passive, which we don't have the patch notes for, so I can't really tell you if that's going to be the case. But we also have Inspired Learning on here, which has fallen out of favor, but is still worth quite a bit at the start of a season. So assuming, again, nothing is weighted for jewels, we have a 3 out of 5 chance to get something very good. Unfortunately, Fire Song and Might are just bricks, as they're not worth anything. Moving on to items. So obviously we have Aegis. Aegis is the only champion kite shield in the game. And this most likely will not be a case use for the Omen, just because Aegises are so common, especially for party play players. Personally, I found 10 Aegises last season is just raw drops. So it's a rare item, but it's not super rare. And because of that, it's never going to be worth a lot of money, even at the start of a season. It'll maybe peak at 5 or 4 div at most. Unless, again, Aegis builds are super popular next season. We'll see what happens there. But if there is profit, this might be an item to keep in mind. Another one, and this is going to simply be maybe a day 1, day 2 thing, and that's it, is Heat Shiver. Heat Shiver has gotten stupidly popular recently. And because of its popularity, it's actually worth about 40 to 60 C day 1, which is about a divine day 1. And if you just so happen to get yourself one of these omens, it might be worth to use it on a Heat Shiver, as Heat Shiver is the only leather hood. There's also Frost Fernal, but Frost Fernal cannot drop anymore. So the only leather hood is a Heat Shiver. Moving on to the really interesting cases of Marohi Equi. Now, this might not seem like a very good target. You might be saying to yourself, Allie, why would you ever chance a Marohi Equi? It's a pretty decent weapon. And recently it has had its rarity changed to now being a tier 0 unique. This is so rare that it's basically Headhunter and Mageblood rarity. And it's fair enough. It's actually a very strong weapon. It could have up to 1.1k raw physical damage, which is kind of insane. The PDPS of this is very good until we get a mere tier items later on. And for some builds, actually might just straight up be best in slot. It's very good for slams, for example. Now, this is the only Karui Maul. And that alone is not enough of a reason for you to want to chance this, because it's only going to be worth a few divs. It's not very popular, but let me show you something. Let me show you something that I don't think anyone's thought about, which is going to skyrocket the price of this. And again, I'm sorry if I caused this, but this is going to skyrocket the price of Marohi Equi. So because it's a Karui Maul, and because that's a base that's common, well, if we take a look right here at Mauls, if you go do Heist, in Heist, you can get items that have a orb applied to them. So these are all Karui Mauls that have a tempering orb pre-applied to them. And what you can find are Karui Mauls with a 15% physical modifier on it. And if we can find a 15% physical modifier Karui Maul, and because it's guaranteed to turn to Marohi Equi, we can suddenly get a 15% physical modifier Marohi Equi, which is worth probably very close to a mirror. One, because it's a tier 0 unique. So if you were to take this and attempt to chance it, it would probably be over 100,000 chance scours. And two, if you attempted to put a 15% physical modifier on there with tempering orbs, it probably costs you near a mirror unless you get super, super lucky. So because of this, there's actually some items that become straight up busted. A Marohi Equi with this on it actually becomes a very, very strong weapon, and it hits somewhere around 900 PDPS, if I'm not mistaken, with this roll on it, which kind of makes it beat most two-handed maces and most two-handed weapons in general for quite a while. So because of that, what you could do is potentially snipe some of these, use a Omen on them, and then suddenly you have one of the best weapons in the game for a decent portion of the start of the season. Because of that, those bases are going to be worth a lot, and this might increase the price of this, because this, if it had that on it, would easily be worth hundreds of divs in the current season. Next up, which might depend on popularity, is Brass Stone. Brass Stone is the only gladiator plate, and again, if the Omen is cheap enough, this might be worth doing, because Brass Stone is worth a decent amount on its own, especially in the first week of the season. But if you happen to hit a +5, then it's going to be worth quite a lot of money at the start of a season. So this might be a little bit of a gamble in terms of what roll you get, as the roll very much determines the price of it, but it could be worth something as well. You might want to look into this yourself and see what prices look like. Up next, we have Goal. Goal is the only Raven Mask. This is a pretty popular week 1 item, but it very quickly loses popularity after week 1. This is just a zoom helmet that quite a lot of people like. And for some reason, it feels like the drop rates of Goal has been nerfed quite heavily. It used to be a 10 to 15 chaos item, but now it's multiple divines, and all of that seems to simply be just to it being substantially more rare. Up next, we have Siege Axes. The only two Siege Axes on here are Replica Soul Taker and Soul Taker. Soul Taker typically is worth around 5 to 10 divines, and this is simply based on the popularity of minion builds, because a Soul Taker can be combined with a Heartbreaker to make a Kingmaker, which is best in slot for anime Guardians. So depending on how many minion builds are going to be played this season, which I think is going to be quite a lot considering getting a new minion support gem, which seems pretty strong, this will be a popular option to potentially chance, as it'll be worth quite a lot of money and should hold its value the whole season. Now, another thing I want to mention, obviously, are the 3 super uniques. We have Mageblood, we have Headhunter, and we have Squire. What I think might happen, and again, this simply depends on how they weight it, is that most likely after a week or two, it's going to simply be priced around Mageblood, because even if it has like a 1% chance at a Mageblood, well, then suddenly it's worth at least 1% of a Mageblood. This is going to be something that's going to have to be tested to see how weighted it is. And this might be something that might randomly spike the price of them mid-season, depending on how people value the chances of it and how much data is given on it. For example, if we look at Ancient Orbs are 100% priced around Mageblood, Squire, and Headhunter, and nothing else. They are completely useless for basically any other purpose. And because of that, they also kind of can't be used anywhere else because they're probably going to be too expensive to be used for any unique that isn't one of 3 mega rares. At the same time, you also need other bases for it. But we'll see what happens with it. For now, we do have quite a few of really interesting options. And I'm really, really interested to see if the possibility of Morohi Equi being made into a pretty godlike weapon is going to change the price of these. I'll actually be paying attention to physical modified Karui malls to see if they go up or down in price based on the popularity of slam builds. That's all I really have to say for this video. If I've enlightened you, I hope you have fun with it. If I've crashed the markets, I'm sorry. It's what I do. I'm going to crash a few markets here and there, right? But anyway, I will see you guys in the next video. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. I'm also live on Twitch every single day, so you can feel free to come by and ask your questions there. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys in the next video.